Okay.
What's your background?
Yep. Okay, my name is Omar nakib. I'm a Kuwaiti artist. I've been pretty much doing art since the moment I could pick up a pencil, and my entire life has just been, reading book after book, watching movie after movie, making a work of art after another work of art. If I could tell you the one reason I'm put on this earth, it would probably be to make art, and it's probably the only thing that is always going to make me happy, So that's about it. But no official real background. I just make art, because I love it. Like when people make that distinction between what a real job is and what an artist does, it's just romance. It's just we like to think of someone stuck in a garret making art with their canvas and they're alone and they're moody. But at the end of the day, whether you're making realistic art, whether you're making abstract art, it all has to do with craft. Have you mastered a skill? And it's no different than the skill of a coal miner or the skill of a baker even, If you can make a really good croissant, a perfect chocolate croissant, you are as much an artist as Picasso is, It just has all to do with skill, craft, and, as they say in sports, for the love of the game. For the love of making art. I truly don't think there's any distinction. And at the risk of sounding hippy-dippy, everyone to some degree is an artist, even in a traditional sense. Generally everyone likes to draw, even if you can only draw a smiley face. It's fun to draw. It's a human instinct, and we've been doing it since the caveman days, Yes, art is a therapy. It's a great therapy for me, but it's more of a byproduct of something. I just love the process of making art. It's when I make a work of art, it's what I'm supposed to be doing in the world. It's what I feel. It's that something in me that compels me to make a work of art. And the byproduct of that, though not the reason why I make art, is the therapy it gives me. It gives me peace of mind. It cleanses me. It purges me, You can just dump and vomit everything onto the canvas. And so it really, really does help, and it does get you through some things, Aside, it would save you 60 KD per session going to a really good therapist. You could just buy a canvas from Jarir for 3 KD 250, buy a paintbrush, and do it at home. Unless you have real mental issues, which is something else entirely.
And speaking of mental issues, do you think this making art will result in a bit of a sacrifice towards the end of their lives?
No, I think actually that's a myth. There are artists, of course, who are very messed up and who have ended up in mental asylums, who have famously cut their ears off and then killed themselves. But actually, for the most part, a lot of artists are actually quite happy people. I mean, all you have to do is actually look at, Picasso was known to be a bit of a, I don't want to use foul language, but he was known to be a bit of a guy, but he wasn't deeply unhappy. Look at Matisse, the other giant titan of the 20th century. He was very happy. He would paint in his bed. He would lie down even when he was bedridden after countless surgeries. He would be lying down with a big stick and just painting on the walls because it gave him so much joy. We do have the Van Goghs, and we do have, the people who already have their demons. But that's just, again, that's romance. That's the same thing, between this, distinguishing an artist from a regular job kind of person. That's something that's way overblown. It is there, but for the most part, artists are just normal people. Look at the most famous artists in the world right now, two of them, Jeff Koons and Damien Hirst. They're businessmen. They're very sound of mind. They might be a bit weird, but they don't seem to be unhappy at all. If anything, they seem to really, really enjoy life. So I personally think that that's just a myth, but there are some.
Some may believe that there is a red line in art. Things that shouldn't be done, shouldn't be expressed.
Yeah.
First of all, what's your opinion on that?
Oh, I don't. I think everything and anything should be expressed. And there's a great tradition of artists that really push the line. Probably some that I can't say on camera, or even just say around Kuwait because it's so sacrilegious, it's so shocking, it shakes you. But there's also kind of art that people say you shouldn't do because they think it doesn't require any effort as well. There was an artist in the 60s named Carl Andre, I think his name was, and in a gallery, instead of presenting pieces, he used to be a railway worker. He just got bricks from his job at the railway and presented it in the studio, and that was the piece. And people thought, of course, you shouldn't do that. That's a red line because art should be beautiful. Art should have craft. Art should be yada, yada, yada. And they think that a cult of ugliness has overtaken art. But overall, this is an unfocused answer, but overall, no, I think you can use art for anything, for any extremity, and it could still be effective. I mean, look at, you'd have to Google this, but the Vienna Actionists, an artist like Günter Bruce. Google that. I'm not going to tell you what it's about, but just Google that stuff. And Hermann Nietzsche as well.
And recently we've seen an artist, Shuruq.
Amin, yeah.
Amin.
Yeah.
Recently she's been banned.
Yeah.
After only 1 week of her art show.
Yeah.
And now the audience has, so will you see a photo of said art piece.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Is this a red line?
No, this is actually incredibly tame. This is, I mean, I like the piece, you know, and it's such a shame they shut the show down, but this is nothing. This is actually, if anything, if you were to put this in a, let's say, a Western gallery or anything like that, they would just move past it. This painting's not going to encourage anything, and it's not going to not encourage anything. It is just a painting, and you know, people say this kind of thing. I remember in the early 2000s there was this argument as well with video games though. Do violent video games cause violent crimes? And they were saying like GTA, of course, and stuff. And you think, no, there isn't a correlation between that. The kind of person who's going to cause a violent crime is going to do it anyway. Whether they played GTA, whether they watched a horror film, whether they did whatever. And I think the same does apply with a painting like this.
And in another art form, can you talk about literature?
Yes,
books.
of course.
In the year, as of 2018,
Yeah.
for the past 5 years since then, 4,390 books have been banned.
Yeah.
And so, what do you have to say about banning this art world?
Oh, I think it's the most horrific thing you can do is to censor works of art, to ban books. I mean, people have been doing it everywhere. They've been doing it in the West as well. We're not the first people to do it, of course. But I think it's a travesty. I think it is creative death. I think everything should be out there. You have the choice to read it. You have the choice to not. See, people are having fun over there. It's always good. But I think it's ridiculous because on that list, I remember last time I checked, there were people like Dostoevsky and stuff. And actually, I think my cousin's on there, or aunt, nakib, her book, The Hidden Light of Objects, I think was banned as well. And I'm 100% against this and any kind of censorship, frankly. I think, if anything, when it comes to literature in particular, it's not that it's more that they don't want to encourage you to think. I think that's what it is. They want you to stay in your little bubble, and they want you to just be a good little citizen, you know? Not to sound like how I sounded like when I was 16 years old and I thought everyone was a conformist, but I do think that's true. I think free thought is a threat to some people.
Do you think there is too much freedom and too much chaos?
There's no such thing. There's straight up no such thing in art. If anything, art is it just reacts to another. The reason why we have abstraction is because, you know, we've had people who, you know, fetishized a really well-made painting, you know. The reason why we have the Impressionists is because we had the French, you know, classicist painters and stuff like that, where everything was just perfect, every shadow was excellent. The Renaissance ideals were carried through. In reaction to that, that's when people started to get a bit crazy, and that's when you have people like Monet and Manet and all these people just breaking the rules bit by bit. And naturally that goes. So you could start from a Monet and end at a Jackson Pollock, which is just, you know, splatters, you know, or a Rothko, which is just a color field sort of thing, you know. I just think it's actually the natural course. I don't think there's too much chaos. I don't think there's too much control. But right now, art is in a place where anything goes, and that's the beauty. I think it's actually kind of healthy to have a space where you can express anything at all. And people can say what they want, you know. People can disagree. That's the beauty of it. You know, Marcel Duchamp said this, is like, not everyone's an artist, but everyone sure is a critic, you know. it's all right to disagree. The artist is just putting something out there, and you could say whether this is too far, this is disrespectful, this, that, or maybe it's not far enough, and that's all right. But I think the artist should have that sort of the ability to express themselves in any manner which they choose, so long as it's not actively harming people.
So if we look at history,
Yeah.
and we see the Greeks, for instance, how
Yeah.
their art led to misbelief, miseducation of the people, where they now pray to false gods. They pray to their sculptures. They pray to what their hands made. So isn't that an example of art going beyond its true meaning?
Well, no, well, actually with the Greeks, it's the deities, the gods that came first, and then the works of worship comes through that, you know? So like, you have all the sculptures and stuff, and you have the vases in ancient Greek art, they're very beautiful works, but they're not actually worshiping the works. They already believe in those things, the deities, and this is just their way of sort of either giving thanks and stuff like that. And you have people like, let's say, the philosopher Socrates, who spoke out against it and said that these are false things and that you should free your mind, and they killed him, you know, because at the time that's what was considered blasphemous. You know, you can't say that to the Greeks. Socrates was corrupting the youth by exposing the falseness of, you know, like, oh, you know, you have Zeus and you have this and you have that, you know. Yeah.
In history,
Yeah.
many historical
Yeah.
events are dictated through art. The Renaissance, the different periods,
Yeah.
and wars, battles, they're dictated through art paintings.
Yeah.
So history is written through these canvases.
Yes,
Do you
but
think artists should be allowed to
what?
write history as they
Well, the thing is, what history is actually all subjective. I mean, Napoleon Bonaparte himself said that history is a pack of lies agreed upon. But in terms, I think you are maybe overstating the impact art has on history, you know? While art is very important, art has inspired things, you know? And not just, of course, art as we know it like paintings, but let's say a work, you know, even though you wouldn't conventionally call it a work of art, but let's say like the Communist Manifesto, of course, you know, it's all the Russian Revolution and all those things. But I do think we're overstating the power of art. Art is usually, especially like if you look at Renaissance art and stuff like that, it's either depicting mythological scenes or things that have already happened, not things that is used to encourage people. Because of course the people who with the money were actually like the clergy, or like the Pope, you know. It was the Pope that commissioned Michelangelo to do the Sistine Chapel, you know. And so if actually anything, the artists didn't have that much control. They had the skills, they had the genius, so to speak, but really their content was controlled by the very people, it's as if you're saying like the people who wanted art to be regulated. So art actually wasn't free until I would say the mid-1800s really. That's when things started to really took off. But for the most part, like everything you mentioned, that's a lot of that stuff where you were at the whim of your patron, who's the person who gave you the money, you know?
Why do we have to paint the human body if we can paint nature, if we can paint abstract?
Yeah.
And for example, in Islamic art, they are so diverse. Carpet making is it's so diverse.
Yeah, calligraphy, you have, that's one of the greatest arts there is. Yeah.
That being said, why should artists go to the area that some believe that this is subjective, that it can cause harm? Why not go to the thing that people know it does not cause any side effects?
Well, see, that's the thing. That's society to society. I mean, right now, you know, people are saying it's taboo to like paint the nude body, but let's go back to the Greeks and the Romans. To them, that was the most pure thing you could do. Even the same with Renaissance artists. The human body was the purest thing, you know. And why not paint landscapes? Why not paint this? Well, you know, people have painted landscapes, and sometimes you get bored with landscape. Sometimes people aren't interested in landscapes and they want to do something else. They shouldn't have their whims dictated by people who have their own interests in mind. I think they should be free to do what they want, you know, as long, again, as they're not actively harming anyone, you know.
The chairman of the Arab Theatre, he says, there's a decline in freedom. Every new decade,
Yeah.
our freedoms are lost until we will reach the narrowest limit of freedom.
Yes. Yes.
Do you agree with this?
I mean, yeah, that's true. You could see it in, let's say, you can look at even the Nazis. The Nazis, they would designate a person like Picasso or all these other, the more stranger artists, as they'd call it intalte Kunst, which I think, if my German isn't failing me, it means degenerate art. Hopefully the pronunciation was good. And at the same time, let's say with the Soviets, you had I forgot what it was called. National Socialist, not National Socialist, that's the Nazis, but social realism, where artists who were strange and abstract were cast out. It was seen as dangerous art, and instead what they wanted was art of like strong men and women and children working at a farm, all happy together. It's the most saccharine kind of, it's supposed to like boost the country's morale pretty much. But of course, the art was, even though technically it was fine, artistically it was bankrupt, it was horrific. There was no imagination, no creativity in it. And that was what state-sanctioned arts. And the artists who could paint and who were a little out there were silenced. Not just artists, poets, you know. Osip Mandelstam, great poet. You know, you write something that's slightly critical or slightly out there, you're done. You know, that's why there are people who work around it like before. This was, I guess, towards the end of the Soviet Union, but there's a very famous Russian filmmaker named Andrei Tarkovsky, directed incredible films, Solaris, Stalker, Zerkalo, The Mirror, you know, great stuff. He said, I could make the movies I want to make, just never critique the government. That's all it is. Never say that, and just make what you want to make. That's what you have to do.